Welcome back, everyone. This is Tim2716. You can call me Tim, and today I'm going to be making a video on my top 10 least favorite and top 10 favorite cars, starting with my top 10 favorite and then going to my least favorite. The link to this Mandelbrot Zoom footage will be in the description. It is really cool, and I can't think of anything cooler than this for background footage. I don't think there's anything cooler. Anyway, ignoring my rant on how cool Mandelbrot footage is, let's set some ground rules. First rule, no one-offs. I can't just put some one-off race car on this list for my number one pick, because it has to be a car that other people in the world own, even if it's just one other person. Number two, I can put more than one car per entry on this list, because there are some cars that I think are equally awful to other cars or equally good to other cars. And three, I can pick a specific trim level for a car, so it can either be the entire car or a specific trim level. Anyway, let's go on. Starting off with my number 10 favorite car of all time. My number 10 pick is a little bit of a controversial decision. It is the BMW i8, specifically the i8 Roadster. One of the biggest complaints about this car is its 0 to 60 time, with many people calling it slow and thinking it's slow. Now, this isn't the fastest car to 0 to 60, but it still hits it in 4.4 seconds, which I'd say is decently fast, at least. And everyone on the internet seems to think, oh, it's so slow, just because everyone is used to cars doing super fast 0 to 60s nowadays, and I personally don't care. If I'm buying the Roadster version, I just want to enjoy it. I don't want to do 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. I'd personally much rather drive it through a park with the roof down, just enjoying my surroundings and all the wind and birds and stuff like that. I would enjoy the park and I'd enjoy the car, knowing I'm not driving a rolling coal pickup truck and I'm driving something that's pretty fuel efficient. And that's one thing I really like about it. Another thing I really like about the BMW i8 Roadster is it comes in a copper finish, which I think is absolutely just gorgeous. It's an absolutely gorgeous color on an absolutely amazing car. The car also has butterfly wing doors, similar to a McLaren, and the car can get up to 50 miles per gallon. This is obviously depending on how hard you accelerate or how intense you drive the car itself. If you drive it like a Formula 1 car, you may possibly get Formula 1 MPG. Anyway, that's basically all for my first entry. Now, let's go on to number 9. My number 9 favorite car of all time is a car you've probably heard of before, especially if you've watched my Mr. Incredible Becoming Uncanny Car Edition video, which is my 5th most viewed video, 29th including YouTube Shorts. The particular car that I am talking about right now is the KTM Crossbow. Now, why do I love the KTM Crossbow so much? Simple, just look at it. It is so extreme looking. It's actually pretty short of a car itself. It's super lightweight, it's super fast, and I just think it is so cool of a car. In fact, at one point, I was actually considering on buying one, making it my life destiny to save up to buy one, until I realized they're not street legal in the United States, which really makes me sad. Seriously, government, out of all the things you can be doing, you're banning all these super cool cars because they don't go to your exact specifications. That's just annoying. But yeah, it has this spot on this list because at one point it was my dream car. It's not anymore, but it's still a car I would very much like to own someday. Now, let's go on to the next entry. My next car is a little bit of a strange choice, but for number 8, I choose the Peel Viking Sport. Now, when you look at this car, you think, oh, it's a little tiny Volkswagen Beetle looking vehicle, or Porsche 911 looking vehicle. Nope, it's made by the same people that made the Peel P50, the world's smallest car. And this car has about 40 horsepower and can go 70 miles per hour. This car does weigh about 600 kilograms, which is on the heavier side, and sadly, only about 7 of these are still known to exist, which is pretty sad considering how cute it is. Thing is, I want to buy it so I can just drive it around whenever I'm feeling sad. I can drive it down country roads, probably stop at a farmer's market somewhere, buy a watermelon or two. Then I can drive home in my little tiny car that people are probably going to laugh at me for driving, but I don't care. Also, to get a sense for just how small this car is, here is a PLP 50 compared to a semi-truck or lorry. Now here's a picture of the entire PL lineup. That red car is the Viking Sport. That car with the bubble top is the Trident. That other blue car next to the Trident is the PLP 50, and that car next to the PLP 50, I don't actually know what that is, but it's probably a prototype. Sadly, due to it coming from the Peel company, the same company which sold a PLP 50 for $176,000 and a Peel Trident for $121,000, the Peel Viking is not going to come cheap, as the lowest price I could find for it is about 20 grand, which is kind of good compared to the other ones, but it's, well, just how little people know about it. That's why the price, I'm guessing, is so low, especially compared to the prices of its other microcar brethren. Now let's go to my number 7 spot, which is a much more well-known car. A car you might actually own right now. There are 2 different cars in this list, the Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla. These 2 cars I'm putting in this spot because of just their historical significance. The Corolla is the best-selling car of all time, and the Civic isn't that far behind. These cars right here basically just changed the entire American car industry after and during the fuel crisis in the 70s, where basically every American car back then had a giant V8 or something like that. These cars had small little engines that were very fuel efficient, some of which were so efficient that they were actually below the legal requirement for a catalytic converter. So even without one, they were still so efficient that they didn't even need one. And these cars, basically, they are the kickstarting for basically small cars in America, which sadly isn't that big of an industry in America, because everyone wants to drive giant trucks and SUVs. But these cars, I think, are really important, as they are basically one of the reasons why America kind of didn't collapse, because, well, these cars let people move around without guzzling fuel like it's like there's no tomorrow. These cars right here helped to basically keep the economy from slowing down, because if the economy slows down, less people can get to their jobs and contribute to society, and when less people contribute to society, the economy starts to struggle. These cars allowed people to continue with their daily lives without having to worry about fuel too much, which is one of the reasons why they're on this list. For my number 6 pick, I'm choosing none other than the Bentley Continental GT. Specifically the W12 version, because the V8 version is for poor people. The V8 version, if you ever pull up next to me, like let's say I'm at a car meet with my W12 Bentley, and you park next to me in your V8 Bentley, I will poor shame you. It's a part of the Bentley guidebook, part of the Bentley rulebook. If you don't poor shame anyone with a lesser model than yours, you will have your car taken away from Bentley's founder themselves. That is literally the rules. It's totally like I did not make that up. Other than that reason, the reason why the Bentley Continental GT W12 is such a good car in my opinion is it's just, I believe it is gorgeous, like actually drop dead gorgeous. Now, some cars are more beautiful than it, but it's just what I personally believe. I think the car is beautiful. I think the interior is absolutely incredible. The rolling display is just absolutely amazing. I feel like more companies should implement a rolling display in order to prevent any distractions while driving your car. But yeah, The Bentley Continental GT kind of explains itself, because it's a Bentley, a luxury car that can be driven like a sports car, and it is so comfortable of a car. It is super fast, and I've actually seen one in real life, and it's even better in real life. Anyway, on to my number 5 pick. My number 5 entry has 2 cars on it, but one of them happens to be slightly better than the other. My next car on this list is a two-way tie between the Hummer EV and the Hummer H1. The Hummer H1, in my opinion, is slightly better because it's the actual military vehicle, but the Hummer EV is a more civilian-focused vehicle. It's a vehicle that's more comfortable than the regular military version, with a little bit less cool factor, and due to it being an EV, some think it's terrible. Some even think that the H2 and H3 are better. That is a complete lie. The EV is better because, unlike most EVs, this one is actually really, really cool. It has a pretty cool interior with a lot of metal and stuff like that in it. Also has a lot of cool patterns indented into a lot of the surfaces. In the back, the surface for the bed in the back is actually the surface of the moon. The speakers are also the surface of the moon. And it's just a cool car with tons of Easter eggs. Now, for the original H1, it is just amazing because it is a military vehicle that is not like anything else. It's a military vehicle that gets horrible fuel economy, is extremely heavy, is rather slow, but is still really, really cool due to the fact that it was a genuine military vehicle that a civilian can own and drive. That is something that makes it so cool. And I would genuinely say the H1 is cooler than the EV, but mainly because it's the military vehicle. The styling of both vehicles is really cool, and it's just incredible. The EV looks futuristic, but yet really tough, similar to the H1, while the H1, while looking less futuristic, looks even more tough, and even more just unbelievably strong and just brutish. The Hummer H1 is also cooler than the EV for one reason. It was genuinely dropped out of a plane and helicopter while in service as a military vehicle, which is just one of the coolest ways to have a vehicle revealed in any capacity. If you're showing off a vehicle, I believe dropping it from a helicopter and having it still completely drivable is one of the coolest ways to show off a vehicle ever. My number 4 vehicle on this list is none other than the Rolls-Royce Spectre. This is Rolls-Royce's new EV car, and I believe is just insanely cool. And it is the best Rolls-Royce model ever made because it's electric. I believe that in all the car industry, there's only a few companies where making all their cars go electric will not make me upset. Rolls-Royce is one of them. Their cars are not focused on being loud and fast. They're focused on being comfortable and quiet and just a serene experience that's just pure comfort. This is why I believe the Rolls-Royce Spectre is the best Rolls-Royce ever. Not including one-offs, but is one of the best Rolls-Royces of all time. Just being such a good idea. It's a good vehicle that is incredibly comfortable. It hasn't come out yet, but I just know it will be absolutely incredible by anyone's standards, especially by Rolls-Royce standards. It will just be fantastic. A car that will please everyone who is a Rolls-Royce fan like me. It's a car that, while being electric, is still fantastic. I believe that this car, being electric, will bring home more the point of what a Rolls-Royce is about. It's about comfort and just enjoyability of just being driven around. It's not about going fast and being loud. I believe that a Rolls-Royce should be number 1 in these 3 following factors: smoothness, quietness, and comfort. This vehicle, I believe, will perfectly encapsulate all of that. Now for my number 3 pick, I will go over what I personally believe is the polar opposite of the Rolls-Royce Spectre. It has a naturally aspirated V12 and a 6-speed manual and 3 seats. I'm of course talking about the McLaren F1. The McLaren F1 was a race car, hypercar, homologation car that managed to break the world's production speed record and keep that record for 13 years, from 1992 all the way up to 2005 until the release of the Bugatti Veyron. The McLaren F1 also is known for winning Le Mans against purpose-built race cars, which is one of the reasons it has such a high status and gets so much praise. The car itself is valued at around $25 million, which I will say is a little overpriced. I would not pay that much for it, even with its historical importance. I'm personally not the biggest fan of its looks, but that will most likely change when I actually see it in person, because this is one of the cars I plan on actually seeing at some point in my life, just to see just how cool it is. This is a really, really cool car. Just everything about it is cool. Its engineering process is cool. The looks are cool. Everything just about it is just incredibly cool and fast and just designed for racing and for usability. The car itself is actually somewhat practical with 3 seats, but doesn't have the largest amount of storage. It does have 2 storage pockets nearby the rear fenders, which is really cool. If you want to hear more about the McLaren F1, I have a few videos in the description that are linked about the McLaren F1. One of them's by Doug DeMuro, and the other one is a video essay about the history and engineering of the McLaren F1, which I recommend you see both of them if you're curious. On to my number 2 spot. I personally only think there are 2 cars better than the McLaren F1. One of them is the Koenigsegg Jesko, not the Jesko, Jesko. In my opinion, this is the most beautiful car ever made ever since the 60s. These 5 cars you see right here are, in my opinion, the only cars ever made that are more beautiful than the Koenigsegg Jesko, all of which were made before the 60s. Because I believe that around the end of the 60s, car designs started to go downhill slowly but surely. Car designs became worse and worse over the decades, becoming a lot cheaper and more boring and unexpired. Some car designs just flat out ruined their entire parent company, causing some of them to even go out of business. But in 1994, a company was born. That company is from Sweden and their name is Koenigsegg. Koenigsegg is one of my favorite car companies in the entire world, and they've made some of my favorite cars. I haven't really been the biggest fan of them until they made the Jesko. The Jesko was a design that I just fell in love with the first moment I saw it. Why? Because one of its press colors was orange. That was one of the biggest reasons, and one of the reasons I also fell in love with it, its looks. This car, I would easily say, is beautiful. Absolutely drop-dead gorgeous, in my opinion. This car incorporates a lot of extreme designs with its aero elements, but a lot of smooth flowing designs with its shape. The car is also the first car to ever use Koenigsegg's light-speed transmission, which up to this day still holds the record for the fastest shifting transmission. The car itself also holds a couple records, but one of them is fastest production car. The car itself plans on going at 330 miles per hour for the absolute version, and the attack version, my favorite version, is estimated to go 310. Other than its looks, its performance is nothing to be disappointed at. It can do 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. It makes over a ton of downforce. It is incredibly loud. It's also one of the fastest revving engines, being able to rev its engine from 0 to red line in 0.216 seconds. I believe that is the figure. But other than that, the Koenigsegg Jesko is one of the best cars ever made, in my opinion. Just such an amazing car. The only thing it lacks is practicality and fuel economy. Before I get to my number one pick, I'm going to go over a couple of honorable mentions. There are a ton of them. I could literally sit here for hours just listing them off, but I'm only going to list a few off. If you want to skip honorable mentions, you can go to this timestamp. Ferrari Monza SP1 and SP2. They're beautiful. They are cars with no roof, no windshield, just beautiful, beautiful Ferraris, speedster type vehicles. The Rolls-Royce Boattail, currently one of the most expensive cars in the world. Believe it or not, it's not a one-off. This car is so incredible for it's beautiful. It's a beautifully designed car, and it's comfortable because it's a Rolls-Royce. It's not a race car. And that umbrella is what gets it for me. That is why it's in the honorable mentions. For our first one-off in the honorable mentions, the Bugatti La Voiture Noire, technically translating to French as the black car. This is a one-off made by Bugatti. Some would say it's a reskin of the Chiron, but no, it's more than that. It's a complete re-engineering of the Chiron into a work of art. Sadly, since it's a one-off, I excluded it. Another one-off that comes in the color black is the Aston Martin Victor. This car is literally named Victor. This car literally has a name like a person, but it was made in order to honor a person from Aston Martin. Victor Gauntlet. Rest in peace, Victor Gauntlet. I personally believe you got the best tribute car ever made. Fiat S76 Beast of Turin and Fiat Mephistopheles. The only Fiats on this current list. And these two cars are land speed record vehicles, but they're both one-offs, with the Mephistopheles literally being a one-off and the Beast of Turin effectively being a one-off, since there is one working prototype and one museum example. Phantom Corsair. This is a one-off car that was made by H.J. Heinz, and this car is just awesome. It's a really crazy looking car, and believe it or not, it can seat 6 people, and it's even shorter than my car. The Phantom Corsair is 140 centimeters tall, while my car is about 171 centimeters tall. My last honorable mention pick is none other than the Pagani Codalunga, which only 5 of these were ever made. Each of them were sold for about $7 million, and they're basically a much more simple version of the Huayra. Their design is so strange, but surprisingly appealing to me for some reason. And that's basically all. Now, let's go to the number one pick. My number one pick is a car you might not expect. It's a car that is a hybrid, has a 3-cylinder, has 4 seats, 2 doors, 1,700 horsepower, can go 250 miles per hour, has enough storage for 4 medium suitcases, and has 8 cup holders. I'm of course talking about the Koenigsegg Jesko. The Jesko is one of the most beautiful cars ever made. This car isn't as beautiful, but it is significantly more practical, and it actually has a really good fuel economy, getting upwards of 31 miles to the gallon. My Kia Sorento gets between 20 and 26 miles to the gallon. This car, which is a hypercar, gets more, and in my opinion, this is the best car ever made. I consider this the best car ever made, not because it fulfills one thing better than every other car, but because it is the best overall car, in my opinion. It has a faster 0 to 60 than the Tesla Model S Plaid. It gets better fuel economy than my car. It is surprisingly spacious on the inside, to the point where someone who is about 6'5" could sit in the back comfortably. The car itself has 8 cup holders, which I believe is on minivan levels. The car itself has a somewhat minimalist interior, but it's still a pretty cool interior. It's not too minimalist, but it is minimalist to some extent. And also, the yellow interior in the press car is just awesome. I believe it is a special and perfect mix of practicality, speed, performance, and just style. It is a little more on the minimalist side, but every vent on the car is functional. The car has center lock wheels, just everything about this car just fits so well together, and the car itself is a hybrid, so it has an engine. The engine in it is a twin-turbo 2-liter inline-3, which you might be thinking is terrible, but this engine's designed in a very specific way to make 600 horsepower, and the car itself doesn't actually sound that bad. My only gripe with this car is that the transmission is a 1-speed. It's Koenigsegg's direct drive, so you won't feel any shifts and it will feel like the engine's droning, so that's one of the few negatives of this car. That, in my opinion, is the best car ever made. Especially the best 4-seater ever made. Thank you for watching my best list. Soon we will go to my worst list. But here's a short message from our sponsor.
Any man who buys the Bentley Continental Grand Tourer is a peasant.
The message from our sponsor is finally done. Now, let's go to the worst section. Welcome to the worst section on this video. The Mandelbrot Zoom is continuing, and the same rules as previous apply. Let's start off with my 10th least favorite car, which, if you're wondering, is every car in Tesla's lineup. Now, the reason why I'm putting all of them here is basically I just think all of them are just boring. And thing is, some of them I like more than others. I like the Model S more than the Model X, and I like the Model 3 more than the Model Y. But in my opinion, the worst of them all is the Model Y, because unlike the Model X, which has those falcon wing doors, which once I went in Indiana, I was just going to a ski slope and I actually caught a picture of one with its doors open. It was really cool. But yeah, other than that, I think these cars are just really boring to look at, and you can't really tell them apart if there's a plaid or just a normal car, if it's the X or S. And also, I just don't like the Model Y. It's basically a Model 3 that's been made taller, just barely longer and wider, like a little bit wider. It looks bloated. That's one of my biggest issues with them. Also, another issue I have with all 4 of these cars is horrendous build quality. Tesla's been struggling with build quality for a while now, and all 4 of these cars are sadly victims of it. I don't want Tesla to fail. I don't want them to have horrible build quality, but I also don't want people defending the horrible build quality. And when I mean horrible build quality, I mean interior quality, not the outer paint quality or the panel gaps, which I couldn't care less about. Yeah, it's the interior that I'm worried about. I don't want the interior to fall apart in my expensive electric car. And that's basically it for Tesla. Number 9 is a car you have most definitely seen before. In fact, when you were a child, you probably rode in it. I'm talking about the Dodge Grand Caravan, which is anything but grand. Now, minivans aren't really the most popular type of vehicle, but I'll say this. Out of all the Fiat Chrysler minivans, the Dodge Caravan is the most outdated of them all. At least with the Chrysler Town & Country, which is now the Chrysler Pacifica, that car has actually changed over the years on its outside and inside. Meanwhile, the Dodge Grand Caravan has stayed basically the exact same on the outside, with doing very little on the inside of changing. Like, it's just such an outdated car. Every time I see it, even if it's a model from this year, it looks outdated already. Like, that is just something I just don't like about it. I just think it's a terrible car, like, when it comes to just styling all over and all together. And also, yeah, Fiat Chrysler is going to be in this video a lot. Also, try and tell me the difference between these 2 cars. One of them is a 2008 model, and the other one's a 2018 model. I can't tell the difference, other than very, very, very little details. And also, this right here is my reaction to when the Dodge Grand Caravan was finally discontinued.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
That's all I have for number 9. Now it's time for number 8. My number 8 pick is a vehicle we all know and hate. It is none other than the Reva G-Wiz, better known simply as the G-Wiz. This is a car that was reviewed on Top Gear a while back, and it is famous for being absolutely awful. Just unsafe, having a horrible battery range, and just being very low quality. Now, it is a very, very budget electric car, but I personally believe that if you were to buy an electric car for such a cheap price, just buy a Changli electric truck that Donut Media recommends. Buy that instead, it's a lot cooler. My number 7 pick is the Mustang Mach-E. I think it is a terrible car. Its styling is mediocre in my opinion, it's a little boring on the boring side, and I don't think it should have anything to do with Mustang because Mustang was never an SUV crossover, or even an electric car for that point, but I am more accepting to the electric concept of a Mustang because if they keep it the same shape, I will be more accepting because it will still be a Mustang to some extent, a sports car. You can't make a Mustang an SUV. That is a line I just won't let anyone cross. Yes, you are hearing me right. I believe the G-Wiz is better than the Mustang Mach-E. At least the G-Wiz didn't try to take an iconic sports car and turn it into something it wasn't. That is what the Mustang Mach-E did, basically kind of trying to twist the Mustang into something it wasn't and probably never should be. Getting over my Mustang Mach-E rant, let's go to our number 6 pick, which is the Alfa Romeo Arna. This car right here is a collaboration between Nissan and Alfa Romeo back in the 80s. It was supposed to be styling of Alfa Romeo mixed with the reliability of Nissan. It was basically the other way around, where it had the reliability of Alfa Romeo and the style of Nissan, which were complete polar opposites of what people wanted. And basically, it was a nightmare come true as it was incredibly unreliable and did not look good really at all compared to anything Alfa Romeo made. But on the bright side, Giorgetto Giugiaro had absolutely nothing to do with this car's design. I am done with my number 6 choice, but I will give a disclaimer, my number 5 choice is a little extreme, so prepare yourself. For my number 5 pick, I am picking 2 pretty controversial cars. This whole situation is controversial. I am picking the Bugatti EB110 and the Bugatti Centio 10. Yes, putting Bugattis in the worst section sounds really backwards, but trust me, I have a reason. In my opinion, these are 2 of the ugliest cars ever made. In fact, just look at them. I will personally say this. Koenigsegg, at least they didn't make their CC prototype, which I consider their ugliest car. At least they didn't sell that to the public, because they realized it's just a prototype. These Bugattis don't have terrible performance, and they're not terrible build quality. They're just so hideous, I just can't like them. These cars right here are just awful looking. They just look disgusting. In fact, Top Cars TV, a YouTube channel I like to watch, they have a line that I just have to show you about this car.
It's just that. When I first saw it, I thought Centio 10 meant god-awful. My God, is it ugly?
But the reason why I find them ugly is their front end. Like, I just think they're ugly specifically because of the front end. The sides don't look bad for the EB110 or the Centio 10. Even the rears of both of them look pretty nice, especially the Centio 10. But the front is what gets me. I hate it on both of them. The silly Bugatti grille is so small. Why? And the thing that makes both of them even more tragic is that they are made to celebrate the company and the founder of the company, Ettore Bugatti. That's what the EB and EB110 stands for, and if I ever have a car that celebrates me and it's absolutely hideous like that, I will come back as a ghost and haunt the designers until they get a facelift. And then after that, I will apologize. Okay, that was a long rant about 2 cars I will probably never see in my entire life, But anyway, let's go on to my number 4 pick, which unfortunately was designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro. This right here is a special version of a 1985 second-gen Mitsubishi Mirage that was designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro. The thing is, Giorgetto Giugiaro is often considered one of the greatest car designers of all time, designing countless amazing cars, but some of the cars he designs I'm not the biggest fan of. This car is probably the worst because of the car it's associated to, the Mitsubishi Mirage. Yes, I am choosing the Mitsubishi Mirage as my number 4 pick, because I only think there are 3 cars that are worse than it. Now, why is it so terrible? Let's see. It's made of really low quality materials, it is quite unreliable according to many sources, and worst of all, it is the cheapest new car you can buy. Not price-wise, but like overall cheapness. It is the cheapest. You're going to get a better deal if you buy a Nissan Versa or a Chevy Spark. Both really underpowered, crappy cars. Those are better. Yeah, the Mitsubishi Mirage used to actually be good. In fact, the older versions from the 70s, 80s, and 90s actually had more power than the Mitsubishi Mirages of today, which is really just sad. How do you make a car that is a modern replica that somehow has even less power? How? Just how? With improving technology, our new car, the new one, should be more powerful. But somehow, Mitsubishi managed to screw this up. And yeah, that's the only connection to Giugiaro I can come up with for the Mitsubishi Mirage. That special design trim level. That's actually a good looking trim level. And that car in particular has 118 horsepower, which is more than a modern Mitsubishi Mirage. Mitsubishi, can you please make your cars higher quality and more powerful, please? I don't want to spend 11 seconds trying to reach 60 miles per hour when my Kia Sorento can do the same in 6. All while not feeling like it's going to fall into a bajillion pieces because everything is so loose and just low quality and just crappily put together. My rant on the Mitsubishi Mirage is over, and now let's go to my 3rd least favorite car of all time. My 3rd pick is none other than any car made by GM Daewoo during the 90s and 2000s. In the Korean car industry during this era, there were 3 big players. There was Hyundai, Kia, and Daewoo. Daewoo was the worst of them all because of General Motors. During the late 90s, early 2000s, Daewoo made many cars under General Motors' tyrannical rule, but 3 of them stick out more than any other. The Lanos, the Laganza, and the Nubira. Arguably the worst of them all. The Nubira is a car that is known for being incredibly low quality, somehow even lower quality than the others, and despite this car somehow holds a 4-star rating on most major car review platforms. Like, here's an example right here if you don't believe me. Some reason this car has such a high rating despite being considered one of the worst cars Daewoo ever made. And Daewoo has made some good cars before. For example, the Daewoo Chairman. It was a collaboration between Daewoo and Sonyang, and it was actually a pretty good looking car with pretty decent quality. And don't forget, Daewoo, along with Hyundai and Kia, also made a bunch of heavy-duty commercial vehicles, which many of them are still operating in South Korea today. And if you're wondering about the Matiz, that was actually an improvement, but sadly, that was one of their last improvements before they went out of business, as that car would soon become the Chevy Spark, which, as I said earlier, is an improvement over the Mitsubishi Mirage, so at least they were heading in the right direction. But sadly, Daewoo closed down in 2011, which, despite making terrible cars, I didn't want them to close down. I wanted them to improve, which they were improving, but sadly they closed down. Anyway, that's basically all for my Daewoo rant. Now, let's go to my number 2 least favorite car. My number 2 pick is anything from the General Motors J platform, any Chrysler Dodge economy car. Anything from those is just my number 2 pick. You could name it. Dodge Intrepid, it's on there. Chrysler Concorde, it's on there. Chevy Cavalier, it's on there. Any of them. If it's on that platform of any brand of those, it is on this list as my number 2 pick. There is only one car I hate more than all of them. And these cars, the reason I hate them is because unlike Daewoo, which was a struggling brand, these cars were backed by major brands which had lots of money, and they could develop a good car, but no, they decided to make crap. They decided to make garbage and not even try. And that's one of the biggest reasons why all of these cars are on this list. They made an economy car that is just so low quality that it's just not good in the slightest. They put no effort into these cars other than the literal bare federal minimum of effort and engineering. Now look at these 2 pictures. One of them is a beautiful Ferrari, the other one is a crappy Chevy. They're both called the Monza. One of them is the Monza SP2, which only 500 were ever made, and they are incredibly rare and beautiful. The other one is a giant crappy car made by a brand that didn't care if their cars were good or bad. They just wanted to make mass-produced garbage. And Monza, calling a crappy car like this Monza is an insult to the racetrack in the city of Monza, which is where it got its name from. And Monza is a city in the region of Lombardy in Italy, if you're wondering. My least favorite of the Chrysler garbage is the Chrysler Concorde, specifically because I'm not sure, but it may have been named after the very famous Concorde jet, which I just want someone to bring it back someday. I don't care if it's super expensive for an economy class. I want someone to bring back Concorde. That's what I want. And I just feel insulted by the fact that this crappy Chrysler was named after one of the best airplanes ever made. It just feels like a slap in the face to anyone who appreciates Concorde. Just remember, these miserable excuses for cars came from companies that were making the Town & Country, the Dodge Viper, the Ram 1500, the Corvette, the Camaro, the Tahoe, the Suburban, the Silverado. All of these good cars were being made, but yet they wanted to make garbage. It's just a shame. I am finally done with my rant on how much I hate 1990s and early 2000s Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat, and General Motors. Now, we're going to go to some dishonorable mentions before we get to number 1, because there are a lot of dishonorable mentions, like over a dozen at the very least. PT Cruiser. The look has kind of grown on me. It's not as hideous as it used to be for me, but it's very unreliable for what I've heard. It's not very high quality, and it's just a terrible car all around, but it wasn't bad enough to be on this list. The same thing also goes for the Pontiac Aztek, which, yeah, the look is still ugly and all, and it's not very high quality, but it was featured in Breaking Bad, which is some extra points for it, and also, considering those Breaking Bad fans, I don't think it's a terrible car anymore. I think it's kind of grown on me. Any 1990s Hyundai and Kia. These cars were during a time when Hyundai and Kia weren't that good at making cars, but they grew from this, and they're now starting to make really good cars that I genuinely find really good. For example, the Kia Stinger and Hyundai Veloster, I think they're pretty good cars. And I am still salty about Hyundai canceling that Envision 74 car. Even if it was $200,000, I would still buy it over a Tesla Roadster. The Reliant Robin. It was a car from 1960s and 70s Great Britain which loved to tip over a lot because It had one wheel in the front and two wheels in the rear, which made the vehicle very unstable. I'm not putting the Reliant Robin on this list specifically because it has a huge fan base, and from what I've heard, it's a little bit reliable and not entirely terrible, so yeah, it's not too bad to be on this list. It's not a good car, but it's still not a horrible, awful, worst car ever made type car. And the same thing goes with the Yugo and Trabant. Those cars have a fan base to some extent, which I kind of respect them for liking a car that is just so miserable to some extent. Thing is, they're basically keeping these cars alive, which, considering these Soviet cars were at one point considered one of the worst cars ever made, they're basically giving new life to these cars, and they're making them not terrible to some extent. And I can really respect that. The Plymouth Prowler. The Plymouth Prowler was advertised as a hot rod despite having an automatic V6, which many people don't like. Personally, I think it would be best if they put a Dodge Viper engine in it with a manual transmission. I think that would be really good. And that, personally, would get it out of the dishonorable mentions altogether. I think it's a cool looking car, but it's not the best car. There were just so many missed opportunities with the Plymouth Prowler. The Chevy SSR. This is a truck-type little vehicle that at one point was offered with a supercharged V8, so it's not slow and not horrible, but its looks are something that aren't exactly that good. Its looks are questionable. The Peel P50 and the Peel Trident. These cars aren't bad, they're just easily the most impractical cars ever made. And just for their sheer impracticality, they're on this spot in the dishonorable mentions. They're still really, really cool cars, but they're just horribly impractical. The Nash Metropolitan. The Nash Metropolitan was a microcar made during the 50s that was advertised towards women, and some people think it's a car that was kind of sexist, which I kind of have to agree with to some extent, because it was advertised as a manageable car for women, even though the Mustang was originally advertised for women. The Nissan Juke. Is it ugly? Yes. Is it slow? Yes. Is it really just stupid looking? Yes. That's basically all. Fiat Multipla. The Fiat Multipla is ugly. Yes, it's slow. Yes, it's made of cheap materials, but same as the Pontiac Aztek and Chrysler PT Cruiser, it's grown on me. Donk cars, or also cars with oversized rims. It only looks good if it's on a classic car. That's usually because those cars have so much styling in them that oversized rims just kind of complement it to some extent. That's like one of the only times it's okay. If it's on a modern car, it just does not look good at all. Literally any car with Lambo doors that is not a Lamborghini or a high-end sports car. Just your Honda Civic, if it has Lambo doors, it's gonna look stupid. That's basically all. The Hummer H2. It's like if someone tried to recreate the Hummer H1 without actually knowing what the Hummer H1 was about. It was about bad fuel economy, really slow performance, really heavy vehicle, and just a military type vehicle. That's what the Hummer H1 was about. The H2 got better fuel economy, had fake helicopter hooks, and was a lot cheaper looking in a lot of ways, which really bugs me. Same thing with the model after, the H3, which is even cheaper. The Hummer EV is pretty good though. Not as good as the H1, but it's still a really good standalone vehicle. Vans with those absolutely ridiculous body kits. Not because they're bad, but just because you need to find anywhere with a really high clearance to do basically anything. So you can't go through a drive-thru, you can't go in a parking garage, you can't go under a bridge. You basically can't go anywhere with these because you have to avoid all low bridges or risk having your really cool body kit destroyed. Any car with an absolutely stupid amount of camber, if it has like 30 or more degrees of camber, then you're just asking for your wheels to fall off, and you're asking for your car to just die of exhaustion because it has to put so much more effort into spinning the wheels compared to if they were just at a 0 degree camber or at a more reasonable degree of camber, like anything under 10 degrees. For my last pick on this list for dishonorable mentions, I'm gonna just take out 3 cars that Doug DeMuro showed off in one of his videos. 3 cars I think are actually bad. The Mercedes-Benz Metris, Nissan Murano Cross Cabriolet, and the Cadillac ELR. The Cadillac ELR is terrible because of just how underpowered it is. Other than that, it's a really nice and desirable vehicle. The Mercedes Metris is just all around bad because it's an inferior version of a Honda Odyssey, Toyota Sienna, basically any minivan is better. And the Nissan Murano Cross Cabriolet is just kind of explains itself. On its own, it's an okay Nissan SUV, nothing to write home about. But it's a cross cabriolet, meaning it's basically a giant convertible and it's pretty ugly and impractical due to the fact that the soft top, yes, it's a soft top, I hate soft tops. The soft top roof gets stored in a compartment above the trunk, so the trunk's pretty small. Also, I forgot to mention that this vehicle has a starting price of $42,000, which is about $15,000 more than the Nissan Murano of the same year. Since we're talking about soft top roofs, I just want to say something. All soft top roof convertibles are terrible. I don't care. If you're buying a convertible, just buy a hard top, Targa, T-top, just a detachable roof. Just buy any of those instead. It'll look cooler, and it's probably just gonna be better overall because you don't have to worry about a stupid decomposing piece of cloth over your head if your car is old. And that's basically it for dishonorable mentions. Now, it's time for my number 1 least favorite car of all time. For my number 1 pick, it is something you'll most likely agree with. It is not just one car. Actually, it's one entire styling trend. I am, of course, talking about squatted trucks. Just where do I even begin with these? 1, visibility is basically non-existent with these trucks since you're laying backwards, basically. And the hood, yeah, anything under 6 feet tall, you can't see. And the farther out it is, it has to be even taller. So they're a horrible safety hazard, and also they just look really, really stupid and ugly and just horribly impractical. And also, they're almost always garbage, always fitted with tons of neon lights and stuff that just don't even look good. It's not even like those neon trucks that Japan has. It's not even like those, which those are cool, probably because those are leveled. A squatted truck will never look cool and will never be cool because it's not leveled. And also, forward squatted trucks are slightly better because you can actually see what's in front of you, but you can't see what's behind you. Which, personally, I believe being able to see what's in front of you is more important considering that there are more cars with windshields than rear windows. Because a lot of supercars and hypercars don't have rear windows. That's because the engine is back there, and they often have to use cameras to see what's back there, which is understandable, and that's why I approve more of forward squatting trucks. Normal squatting trucks are just awful because they're just horrible safety hazards. They're dangerous, they're stupid, they completely ruin any chance of that truck being able to tow anything. They ruin its actual load capacity, they just ruin everything, and they're just hideous. Back when I said the Bugatti Centodieci and the EB110 were the ugliest cars ever made in my opinion, those are actually the second ugliest car after squatted trucks. Squatted trucks are the only thing uglier on wheels I can think of. Third-degree burns are prettier than these trucks. They're just horrible, and I just hate squatted trucks with a burning passion. I think they are endangering people. Even if I'm in my 5'7" tall Kia Sorento SUV, a squatted truck will most likely not be able to see me because they're always so lifted. And I don't want to be rear-ended by something that looks that stupid. I'd rather have my car rear-ended by something that's actually cool. I would rather have my car ran over and rear-ended by an M1 Abrams, because at least if I see one, I could probably have enough reaction time to get out of my car and jump out, because those vehicles have a top speed of about 45 miles per hour. Unlike a squatted truck, an M1 Abrams can actually see you. That is because there are 4 really tiny but really reinforced windows on it. According to this image, at least. There might be more, but the windows it does have, they are really, really enforced, so that is also because it's a tank, and they don't want people shooting into the windows. And the windows are small in order to prevent any damage from being too major, and to prevent giant objects from flying in if the window does happen to break. Yes, this genuinely means that an M1 Abrams, a literal tank, is safer than a squatted truck, because at least they can see you to some extent. With all this said, I'm finally done with this video. I'm done with my squatted truck rant, I'm done with all my rants, I'm done with talking about my favorite cars, my least favorite cars, and a couple of cars in between. I'm done with it. And if you enjoyed the video, subscribing would be nice, but it's not required. It's just recommended. Anyway, I hope to see you guys soon in another video about cars. Bye.